Our land acknowledgement statement is that the Township of Hamilton is situated within the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on these lands respectively acknowledges their resilience and their long-lasting contributions to the area now known as the Township of Hamilton. Item 3, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, that shall be recorded. Item 4, our agenda. That the Committee of the Whole agenda for October 8th, 2024 be approved. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Bruce, seconded by John. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Delegations. 5.1 on our agenda. We welcome Corey Harris from the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority regarding Hamilton Township floodplain mapping updates. The floor is yours. Please.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, it's a privilege to be here to speak with you today. I'm here to talk about floodplain mapping. And I know that's an issue near and dear to everyone's heart. Maybe not.
Some closer than others.
Yes. Yeah, it's certainly in the news. So yeah, it's an issue that's important. And I thought it would be beneficial to just come out and say hello, give you a bit of an update as to where things are at. You may recall I came to council last fall, I think in November, to speak about this issue. The reason being that the federal government had announced an extension to their funding program. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but why this is so important and also exciting is that they are providing matching dollars for floodplain mapping updates across Canada. They have earmarked about 15 million for Ontario. And yeah, they pay 50%. So it's a big discount on being able to get this mapping updated because it's challenging and can be expensive. We've been speaking with staff for the past year, and I know council had endorsed the budget, which included some dollars for this project. And our assumption was going to be that once that announcement came from M&R that this funding window or this funding program had been extended, that the application window was going to be open shortly thereafter, but it just opened recently in September. So we've been waiting almost a year for that funding window to open. So we have been working with township staff in preparing an application to submit to try and acquire some of this federal funding. And the application window opened on September 18th. We had our application in by the 25th. So I understand we were in the first 5 applications that were submitted to the province, and it is being doled out on a first come, first served basis. So fingers crossed we are successful on that. I wanted to just reiterate the importance of this work and the position that the province has taken on getting mapping updated. In their 2020 provincial flooding strategy, they have said priority number 1 is understanding flood risks. And really to do that, you have to do the detailed modeling work to understand the hydrology and the hydraulics of a given watershed and river system. And from that, you can get flood hazard mapping. So they are in alignment with the position that the conservation authorities and a lot of the municipalities have, is getting this mapping is critical. I also presented a map last fall of the status of our mapping across the GRCA watershed. You'll see the only difference from last year's map is that in the spring of this year, we finished updating Durham region. A lot of their mapping was from 1977, and it consisted of punch card models that we can't use. So we were working with them to also take advantage of some of the federal programs to get funding to do that work. So as of this spring, Durham is essentially done and up to date with digital models and up to date floodplain mapping. And you can see the color coding there. Red is basically very old. Not that being from the 70s is old, but it means we don't have digital models to update and keep this information current. So you can see there's a lot in Hamilton Township, there's a fair amount in Port Hope, and the orange is also representing modeling and mapping data from the 90s. And the Ganaraska River is in a similar category. It's quite old too. So lots of work to bring us into the 21st century. And there's the township there. So I just want to point out to some of the history of floodplain mapping in Canada and in Ontario. You can see here that the first program that came out was in the 1970s. It was called the Flood Damage Reduction Program. And it was actually federal, provincial, and local partnership. So all three levels of government were putting funding in to get floodplain mapping done. And you can see here in 1996, all provincial funding stopped for floodplain mapping. That's now been downloaded to the municipalities. What's been exciting in recent years is that the federal government, through Public Safety Canada and Natural Resources Canada, have initiated funding programs to help local agencies get this mapping updated. So you can see on the right-hand side, the Flood Hazard Identification Mapping Program, or FIMP as we're calling it. They were slated to end the program in 2023. They have now extended that to 2028. So the applications that we've put together with the township assumes we would be doing this work over a 3-year window to spread out the costs and make it a little bit more affordable. So in terms of project details specific to the township, there's a lot of work to be done, and part of that is surveying all of the bridges and culverts in the township that are in floodplain areas. So we've counted them all up, and there's 128 structures that need to be surveyed. So out of that, 18 are bridges and 110 are culverts. We would likely need to do this over 2 field seasons, so 2 summers. So that in itself is a lot of work, and we need that information for updated hydraulic models. The drainage area that would be updated in these models is in the ballpark of 255 square kilometers. So it's not a small area. It's quite significant. There are 6 different creek systems that we would be mapping and updating. So that in itself is a fair amount of work. The biggest one being Coburg Creek, and then Gages Creek to the west. And then there's Plainville Creek and some of the smaller ones around the township. We would be updating hydrology information, and that's really drainage mapping and modeling. So understanding your land use, your topography, your soils, how much water is coming off a given subcatchment to a confluence and into a downstream structure. That then in turn can be used to put flows into a hydraulic model, which focuses on the geometry of the floodplain and the structures that are present. In terms of stream length, there's about 168 kilometers of stream that would be updated in terms of mapping. And out of that, we'd be producing over 80 new maps, flood hazard maps for the township, and they'd be at a 1 to 2,000 scale. So as mentioned, we'd be working with the township to complete the work over a 3-year period. We were hoping it would be 4, but given the delay in opening of the window, that same work has to be done in 3. So what that means to the township, it's a commitment of about $63,000 a year for 3 years. And I know in speaking with Arthur, that's a big ask, and we certainly understand and appreciate that. But if we are successful, that would be matched by the federal government to defer and just reduce the cost impacts to the municipality. So fingers crossed that we're successful. So why is this work important? The existing mapping is 49 years old. That that's a bit of a problem in terms of assessing and managing risk within these areas. We're relying on information that's essentially a half a century old. We may run into situations where a culvert or a bridge has been upgraded, but we're not able to update the impacts of the mapping because we don't have any models to update. Without digital models, we cannot, as a conservation authority, meet our obligations of reviewing and updating floodplain mapping on an annual basis, which the province has now required in a reg that came out this year. We've made that very clear in the application that we can update models we don't have. So that's a problem. Also, what would come out of this is updated drainage information, which we can in turn use to support the agricultural community. If a landowner is looking at replacing a culvert structure or a crossing on their property, we'd be able to use these models to confirm the drainage area and what flows they would be seeing under a 2-year storm, a 5-year storm, 10-year storm. That helps with sizing the structures and that sort of thing. So there's a number of benefits by having good up-to-date information. Also, up-to-date models would be shared with the consulting community that works in this area. When they have projects in the township, we can then share these models with them to test different scenarios, whether it's bridge replacements or what have you. We're also looking at building these models in a way that they can support our future flood forecasting and warning efforts. We've also shared that with township staff. So we're looking at potentially integrating our models with radar data and just have a better handle on when a significant event comes into the area, what particular watersheds is it affecting. And so we're trying to think forward and use it for that purpose as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Corey, the 63,000, is that just our contribution to that, or is that in total?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the contribution for the township. It'd be 63,000 for 3 years.
So 63,000 per year.
Yeah, for 3 years.
So, and the federal government will match 50% of that.
That's
So
correct.
they'll match it 50%. So
Yeah.
that would take it down to, that's going to reduce our contribution.
Well, that's the contribution for the matching dollars. So they would be matching 63 for 3 years as well. So
Okay. So it's going to be 120 something. So, oh wow, that's a big, but necessary, right?
it is, yeah. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the amount of effort to get these models updated is significant. And I can maybe explain, we used a number of industry documents to estimate the effort required to do the updates based on the length of stream. We've actually reduced that estimate amount based on our experience in Durham. We feel we could do it for even less minute. And just to give you an example, because we're planning on doing other watersheds at the same time, I think our initial estimate was in the ballpark of 550 based on those industry documents. The total project cost for Hamilton Township is now reduced to in the ballpark of 370,000. Yeah. So I know it's, when you look at multiple seasons of surveying and then building these models and calibrating them with gauge data, and it's a lot of work, and I know it's not cheap. Okay.
Don, questions, comments?
Just thank you, Corey, for your presentation. You said our mapping was 49 years old. My question would be, if the mapping is brought up to date and you find that culverts are not sufficient for any storm management, does that mean that there'll be like a tab or some little sticker put on the township to say you should increase the size of your culverts? Is that part of your mandate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is an excellent question. And once these models are built, we'll be able to test those types of scenarios. And we're actually doing that for Durham Region right now. There's a methodology that's been produced to look at critical issues within a township. You know, where are the police stations, where are the hospitals, where are the emergency services, what roads are being relied on for transportation, what are, you know, flood accessible routes, flood free routes. And we'll have an ability to rank all of these structures through future work and give Lucas and town staff very targeted information to say, you know, these culverts are underperforming given the you know, the standards we're aiming for here. And also this will be of benefit to the county. And I've already had conversations with the county to say, you know, the township is putting effort into this work. If we're doing future risk assessment work, that really should be a partnership with the county and the township. So those discussions have started and they will be continuing. So great question.
Any follow-up, John? Bruce, question or comment?
Scott?
Microphone, Bruce.
On.
Good.
So you, Mr. Mayor, thanks, Corey, for the presentation. I'm sure after 49 years that we really need some updates on these things. So will a lot of this money be like for contract work, or will there be new or additional staff hired, or where will most of that be spent?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, those dollars go into specialists in our shop. So our levy doesn't cover actually all of our staff costs. So we have special projects through Category 2 services that we offer our municipalities to do this kind of work. And we've done similar projects, as I mentioned, like for Durham. And by doing it in-house, we can save a lot of costs. And we have actually, we call it a certificate of authorization from the Professional Engineers of Ontario that it allows us to do this work in-house. So yeah, we're able to do all of it in our shop.
I just wondered, do they, so because we think weather patterns are changing, so when they do this, do they take into account significant weather events that seem to be becoming a little more frequent now, and that will be part of this, so they can be content?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that another great question, Bruce. The funders actually require a number of events to be looked at. We're looking at doing all the design storms from the 2-year storm up to the 100-year storm. We also have an obligation to do the Hurricane Hazel storm, which is the regulatory event for this part of Ontario. But in addition to that, the funders are requiring that a climate change event be added to the suite of storms that gets tested. So it may not, the floodplain associated with a climate change event may not be formally put on a map for planning purposes, but there will be a flood line available that we can share with staff and interested parties to show what a climate change event will do in the township. And we would be doing that for every creek system being tested.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Corey, just more of a comment than a question. There are many in our organization that deal with structures, the roads, bridges, cross culverts. The building department or planning department deal with building applications. And I can assure you that inaccurate, incomplete, or non-existing information is a headache for all of those involved. Inaccurate is probably the one that will get the most conversation going with, and we've had some of that. And we've had, and I can think of a structure over off of 45 Highway. We've had a new municipal bridge built on Myers Road. And the data that was there and the data that should be there today is two completely different things. It would be a pleasure to have accurate and up-to-date information for all that's involved with, without even thinking about the safety components and your notices that would be so much more accurate with detailed information behind. Yes, it's a lot of dollars, and just add a little bit of clarity. The ask for us will be 190,000 approximately over 3 years, being $63,000 per year. And I think there's good value in that. So I appreciate your presentation. I thank you for answering your questions. And I know from my history what some of our staff are going through, and how they would much appreciate having good information. So thank you, Corey.
Okay, thank you. Very much appreciated.
Moving back to our agenda, which we're going through very quickly. Item 5.1 on the agenda is dealing with our delegation from GRCA. We have a prepared motion that reads that the presentation from Corey Harris, GRCA, regarding Hamilton Township floodplain mapping updates be received. Moved by John, seconded by Larry. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Carry. Thank you. Closed session, none. Adjournment. Prepared motion that the committee of the whole meeting held on October 8th, 2024 be adjourned at 1:24 p.m. Bruce, thank you. Seconder, Larry. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.